The owner of the bustling bistro playfully beckoned the unassuming dishwasher to the bargaining table for a light-hearted negotiation. However, the mood swiftly shifted when she meticulously examined the contract. The usual banter among the suppliers abruptly ceased, their expressions hardening as the terms came into sharper focus. For Mr. Harris, the beleaguered owner, the daily grind of managing his thriving establishment left no respite, stripping even the basic pleasure of a quiet meal from his overloaded schedule. These somber musings consistently shadowed his thoughts, a constant reminder of the sacrifices made at the altar of success. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. As dusk settled and the last customer departed, Mr. Harris lingered, casting a wistful gaze into the grand, ornate mirror that hung prominently on the dining room wall. Reflected at him was the image of a man besieged by the rigors of his profession, eyes red and swollen from fatigue, mouth downturned with the hint of a grimace, and a pronounced furrow creasing his brow, signaling worry and constant stress. It dawned on him that perhaps it was imperative to seek some aesthetic rejuvenation. Maintaining an appearance that belied the relentless pace behind the scenes was crucial for someone in his position. Contemplating a brief respite from the unyielding demands of his life brought a flicker of hope. Even a short retreat, perhaps just a weekend, to disconnect and recuperate seemed like a heavenly proposition. Such a pause would afford him precious moments to reconnect with his wife. Their interactions had been reduced to fleeting glimpses at dawn, her figure enveloped in the soft embrace of sleep as he departed each morning. By the time he returned, exhaustion claimed him, and he found her similarly adrift in slumber. This unsettling routine sowed seeds of worry in his heart. The specter of isolation could entice her affections elsewhere, a thought that tormented him. The pang of potential betrayal gnawed at him, a stark reminder of the emotional toll of neglect. Dragging his gaze from the melancholy reflection, Mr. Harris sank into the leather chair behind his desk, where chaos seemed to reign. Amidst a stack of bills and reservation logs lay an elegantly penned resignation letter from his trusted manager, marking the end of an era on this very day. His phone vibrated insistently, piercing his contemplation. It was Jessica, his wife, on the other end, her voice tinged with hopeful anticipation about his return for dinner, yet bracing for disappointment. Her readiness to confront him, should he fail to appear, was palpable. Accepting these strains was part and parcel of his marital commitment. Resilience, he reminded himself, was not just a trait but a necessity in the face of such relentless personal and professional challenges. "Sweetheart," he articulated, endeavoring to suffuse his voice with as much warmth and affection as possible. "Just now, my thoughts were on you." "On me? That's a surprise. It's reassuring to know you haven't entirely forgotten that you have a wife." Mr. Harris sighed deeply and closed his eyes, mentally envisioning her likely response, a playful yet pointed pout signaling her mounting displeasure. He braced himself, well aware that a confrontation was on the horizon. Please understand the enormity of what I'm dealing with here." Chris just handed in his resignation. "I'm utterly overwhelmed. Tomorrow, I need to finalize a contract that I haven't even had the time to properly review." "Of course you're buried in work," she replied with a hint of sarcasm. "It's not as if I expect you to spare a thought for your wife amid such important matters." "I'm stretched too thin, Jessica. It's simply impossible to be in two places at once," he argued, his voice tinged with exasperation. With a firm press of the button, he ended the call. Jessica, ensconced in her world of branded luxuries, beauty treatments, and leisurely escapades, remained blissfully unaware of the sacrifices made to sustain their lifestyle. The reality of where the money came from, his relentless work, seemed a distant concern to her, accustomed as she was to the convenience and anonymity of digital transactions. He slid the resignation letter from his outgoing manager back into the drawer with a resigned flick. thoughts of a vacation, no matter how brief, were luxuries he could ill afford at the moment. "Jerry, it's too soon to consider." "And Victoria, there's still a vacancy here," the bartender declared theatrically, presenting a pristine glass to the dishwasher. His gesture was exaggerated, mimicking a magician's flair, as if he were pulling a rabbit out of a hat for an awestruck audience. It was an old and somewhat cheap theatric trick, yet it still managed to draw gasps from the onlookers as if by reflex. Though there was no hat, no real audience to speak of, just a few waitresses lounging at the bar, watching intently. They were eager to witness whether the bartender could successfully undermine the self-assured new dishwasher. To their mild disappointment, his attempts had thus far proven futile. The glass gleamed under the warm glow of the Christmas garland, its surface reflecting twinkling lights that danced like tiny stars, adding a touch of magic to the otherwise mundane scene. Justin raised an eyebrow in challenge. The dishwasher met his gaze with an indifferent shrug. "And where do you see dirt?" she queried calmly. The waitresses nearby immediately began whispering animatedly to one another, casting disdainful glances in Victoria's direction and snickering. Victoria paid them no heed, considering it beneath her dignity to engage. "So, where's the dirt?" she pressed again, her tone unyielding, as she refused to even touch the glass. Justin pointed to a minuscule speck of dust on the rim of the glass. "You missed this," he asserted, handing the glass to Victoria with a patronizing tone. "You need to be more diligent if you intend to remain part of this team." The atmosphere among the waitresses tensed to its peak. They fell abruptly silent, all eyes fixed on Victoria. The bartender always seemed to find fault with her. Would she tolerate this treatment much longer? Yet, the young dishwasher merely shrugged off the critique, grabbed a towel from the rack, and said, sorry, with a calm that belied the tension in the air. She meticulously wiped away the speck of dust. Justin opened his mouth to add another critique, but Victoria had already vanished back into the kitchen, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. "She must have nerves of steel," one waitress finally whispered. "Completely unflappable," echoed another. "Exactly," a third agreed, her tone admiring. Justin, left without a retort, silently returned the glass to its place on the shelf. Mr. Harris, who had been watching the exchange from the dim outskirts of the dining hall, approached the bar with a crooked smirk. "You're not trying hard enough, Justin," he chided. "You can't even unsettle a dishwasher. You're not cut out for management. Consider this a failure." "Well, I didn't exactly sign up to feud with you over this," Justin retorted defensively. "It doesn't matter. Consider it a loss. We'll chalk it up as a penalty for not completing the task, Mr. Harris insisted sternly. Justin reluctantly pulled a $10 bill from his pocket and handed it over to his boss. Mr. Harris accepted it with a dissatisfied sigh. "You can't rely on anyone these days, Mr. Harris lamented. "What did I ask you to do? Clear her out and make any request you want in return. I want her gone from here, understood?" Justin shrugged nonchalantly. "She's quite competent at her job," he admitted. "She doesn't disrespect anyone, hasn't been caught stealing, and there's nothing to legitimately accuse her of. But if it's your wish, I'll handle it." Mr. Harris slammed his palm down on the bar so forcefully that the glasses clinked and rattled in alarm. "I don't want her here. She was sent by some employment agency, but she doesn't fit the bill. If you can't manage to provoke her into quitting, then perhaps you're not as valuable as I thought. Do you understand?" Mr. Harris's tone was icy, his disdain palpable. The waitresses, overhearing the conversation, fell silent, their earlier banter replaced by a tense quietude. Justin, however, remained composed as he methodically arranged the glasses back on their shelves. "Mr. Harris Justin responded with measured calm. "I understand your frustration. You've been short-staffed since the manager left, and no suitable replacement has been found yet. But consider, would it truly benefit you to lose a competent dishwasher and possibly a bartender too? And what are you now, my therapist, Mr.?" Harris erupted, the veins on his neck standing out starkly as his face turned a shade of crimson that signaled his barely contained fury. "I once studied psychology," Justin replied, continuing his task with deliberate nonchalance. "I even earned a diploma, but it turns out bartending is more lucrative." "Then perhaps you should stick to your field and stop wasting my time. Collect your things and get out." "I don't want to see your face here again, mister," Harris shouted, the rage in his voice echoing off the walls. "Understood, no need to say more. Would you like a resignation letter from me as well?" Justin asked, his voice steady, betraying no sign of agitation. "Write it, mister," Harris snapped. "Follow me to my office. I'll give you what you need to make it official." With a calm that seemed almost otherworldly, Justin followed Mr. Harris toward the office. The waitresses left behind exchanged worried looks, whispering among themselves. "How do we stay out of this mess?" one whispered, her voice low. They all knew the precarious nature of their positions if they attracted Mr. Harris's ire. Dismissal was a near certainty. They watched anxiously as Justin disappeared into the office, unsure of what the fallout from this confrontation might mean for them all. Victoria pushed open the kitchen window, and as the icy air rushed in, she closed her eyes and inhaled deeply, savoring the invigorating chill that filled her lungs. She desperately needed this brief escape, a moment to gather her thoughts away from the chaotic noise that always seemed to fill the hall outside. The raucous laughter and hushed whispers from the girls and the bartender likely echoed through the restaurant, their latest round of gossip spreading like wildfire. She knew all too well the kind of stories they concocted about her, stories that ranged from mildly curious to wildly fantastical. In the rumor mill of the restaurant, she was a mysterious enigma. Some said she was a destitute vagrant the owner had mercifully plucked from the streets, cleaned up, and employed out of sheer pity. Others whispered she was a distant relative of his, a wayward girl with a murky past, an alcoholic, or perhaps something even more scandalous. The tales spun around her life were endless, painting her as a figure teetering on the edge of ruin, only saved by the benevolent boss who didn't let her sink to the bottom. Victoria, however, never spoke a word about her past. She held her silence like a shield, deflecting curiosity and suspicion. Her reticence annoyed many of her coworkers, who mistook her quietness for arrogance. But those who accused her of pride could never find fault in her work. She was always the first to arrive, often before dawn, working with a precision and speed that left no room for error. Her hands moved deftly and efficiently, never faltering, and she maintained an impeccable record. Never had she stolen a single item from the kitchen, despite the countless opportunities that arose daily. Even when she caught the chefs in the act of sneaking ingredients, their hands sticky with guilt, she said nothing. She simply observed, her expression unreadable, and continued with her work. This unspoken code of hers only deepened the mystery that surrounded her. Victoria's straw-colored hair framed a face that rarely showed emotion, her brown skin bearing the mark of someone who had seen much and spoken little. Her lips, often pressed into a thin line, held the seal of silence, contributing to the air of enigma that clung to her. Her presence was a paradox. She was there, yet somehow apart from everyone else. Neither loved nor trusted, she walked through the restaurant like a ghost, seen but not understood. People were wary of her, unsure what to expect from a person who only spoke when necessary and seemed incapable of smiling. This aura of unpredictability kept them at arm's length, making her a solitary figure amid a bustling crowd. Taking another deep, refreshing breath, Victoria allowed the cold air to calm her racing thoughts. She reluctantly closed the window, shutting out the soothing chill. The restaurant was now quiet, its doors closed for the night. It was time for her to leave, to retreat to the solitude of her home where the silence was not a burden but a comfort. She walked through the empty kitchen, her footsteps echoing softly against the tiles, each step taking her further from the whispers and closer to the peace she so desperately craved. In the stillness of the night, she could finally let her guard down, if only for a few precious hours. The doctor began meticulously inspecting the connected equipment, checking the integrity of the connections and ensuring the overall operation of the devices. For a fleeting moment, Lizzie even suspected that Alfred had sent this stranger in a doctor's coat to hasten the arrival of the long-awaited inheritance from the will. But then, Lizzie remembered she had never made a will. Why would she? She had no intention of leaving this life anytime soon. It was all her husband's doing. The cunning man who had drafted everything himself, forged her signature, and bribed the notary with a hefty sum. No, that won't happen. While Leslie was bracing herself for some deceitful trick from the stranger in the doctor's coat, he did nothing harmful. He merely checked the old medical equipment, whose replacement had now become a matter of honor for her. Indeed, Leslie could afford it, as she was famously known as the Sea Queen. Her fishing fleets roamed the vast waters, her floating fish processing plants operated smoothly, and her tourism business, with its couple of coastal hotels, provided a stable income. Well, there we go. I knew it, another malfunction. I'll have to notify the chief, the doctor muttered to himself, carefully adjusting a switch. At that very moment, the room was filled with strange sounds, signaling to the medical staff that the patient had woken up. The doctor jumped in surprise and stepped back. Leslie opened her eyes, her mind racing. The beeping of the machines and the doctor's startled reaction stirred a sense of urgency within her. She had been in this hospital bed for far too long, surrounded by machines that monitored every breath and heartbeat. The thought of Alfred scheming behind her back fueled her determination. She needed to get out of there and reclaim control of her life and her empire. The doctor's eyes met hers, a mix of professional concern and personal curiosity. "You're awake," he said, stating the obvious but with a hint of relief. "How are you feeling?" Leslie struggled to sit up, her muscles weak from disuse, but her spirit unyielding. "I felt better," she replied, her voice hoarse but firm. "But I'm not going anywhere just yet." The doctor nodded, respecting her resolve. "We'll need to run some tests, make sure everything is functioning properly," he said. "But it's good to see you awake." As he turned to adjust the equipment, Lizzie couldn't shake the feeling that time was of the essence. She couldn't afford to be bedridden any longer. There were businesses to run, plans to execute, and a deceitful husband to confront. She had built her empire from the ground up, and she wasn't about to let anyone take it away from her. With newfound determination, she vowed to recover quickly. She would deal with Alfred's betrayal and secure her legacy. The Sea Queen was not done fighting, she was just beginning to reclaim her throne. The door to her modest apartment creaked as Victoria entered, shaking off the chill of the night. She removed her boots, still slightly damp from the melted snow, and flicked on the dim light in her small kitchen. The clock struck 2 in the morning, a stark reminder of how late it was. She placed the cake on the kitchen table, deciding to savor it in the morning when she could fully appreciate Justin's thoughtful gesture. Yet sleep eluded her. Thoughts swirled in her head, a restless jumble of emotions. Justin's unexpected kindness, Mr. Harris's constant anger, and the persistent shadow of her loneliness weighed heavily on her mind. The lingering aroma of the cake provided a small comfort, a gentle reminder that there was still some sweetness in her life. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing thoughts, and finally closed her eyes, hoping for a better tomorrow. Her mind drifted back to simpler times when comfort was scarce and dreams were just taking shape. In those early days, she and Michael lived in a cramped dorm room, saving every penny they earned. Against all odds, their hard work paid off. Within 2 years, they owned a small restaurant, and she found herself expecting their first child. Michael was eager to get married, but she kept asking him to wait, wanting the perfect moment amidst the chaos of their new life. They stayed busy, constantly pushing forward. A trip to Morocco for new recipes added exciting diversity to their menu. Life was hectic but full of promise. Then, everything changed in an instant. One day, it happened, Victoria recalled, her voice tinged with bitterness as she recounted the story to Justin, who listened intently, spellbound by her tale. She took a sip of her tea, her eyes distant. Nothing much, just our stupidity. We were offered a contract to supply Moroccan spices by some guys in our circle who had their plantations. They suggested hiring an excellent chef willing to move to another country. It seemed like a golden opportunity. She paused, the memories flooding back with painful clarity. But the shipment was stopped at customs. The spice sacks contained hidden illegal substances. The plan was for the customs officers to overlook it, and then they would sell it through the chef. When we tried to find those enterprising guys, it turned out they were using fake documents. They vanished, leaving us to deal with the fallout. Victoria's eyes darkened as she continued. Michael ended up under investigation but didn't live to see the trial. I was told it was a heart attack. The restaurant was closed, and I, fearing for my child's safety, packed everything I could into one bag and left for the first city I could find. The weight of her past bore down on her as she finished her story. The silence in the apartment felt suffocating, broken only by the soft hum of the refrigerator. She glanced at the cake on the table, a small beacon of hope in the darkness. Taking another deep breath, she resolved to face the challenges of the next day with renewed determination. She had survived so much already she could handle whatever came next. Finally, with a sense of fragile peace, she drifted into a restless sleep, dreaming of a future where she and her child could find true happiness. Initially, I went to social services, but they turned me away without offering any help. Desperate, I reached out to a women's support center for those facing difficult life situations. They were the ones who truly helped me. They arranged this modest accommodation, found a kindergarten for my daughter, and even helped me secure a job at a restaurant. "Do you still fear him?" Justin asked softly. "That chef and his cronies, is that why you're working as a dishwasher, even though you could do so much more? And why do you wear that wig, trying to blend in?" Victoria gave a sad smile. "Maybe. It's just safer not to attract unnecessary attention, you know. I have a little child. I have to live," she said, her voice matter of fact, as if the injustice she faced, losing a thriving business and a loved one, didn't haunt her daily. "You have to live, simply have to." That's all. Justin felt a surge of frustration and sympathy, wanting to shout out against the unfairness of it all. But instead, he gently covered her narrow hand with his. "You can always count on me," he said sincerely. Victoria smiled at him and nodded, "Thank you." The next morning, Mr. Harris arrived at work in the foulest mood imaginable. The previous evening, he had lost an excellent bartender and didn't realize it until it was too late. Justin wasn't answering his calls, clearly offended by the scoundrel. Frustrated and seeking solace, Mr. Harris decided to come home early, hoping to find comfort in his wife's embrace. But instead of comfort, he walked into a grand scandal. Jessica had decided that this time she would wait for her husband no matter what. Well, she waited. As soon as he stepped through the door, she unleashed her fury. Plates, cups, and even a few carefully chosen pictures whistled through the air, narrowly missing his head and crashing onto the table, creating a culinary battlefield. Jessica's complaints were relentless. She spent her days alone with nothing to do. She was convinced her husband no longer loved her, and she believed he was entertaining himself with a dozen mistresses every night while lying about having troubles at work. Each accusation was punctuated by another throw, until the kitchen was littered with broken crockery, and Jessica, exhausted, slumped onto a chair. Her long black hair was disheveled, and her mascara smeared under her eyes, making her look like a weary, heartbroken clown. "Why did I agree to this?" Jessica sobbed. "I got married, and what did I condemn myself to? I sit here like a bird in a gilded cage, but I could have lived differently. We all could have lived differently." "Mister," Harris muttered under his breath. "But we live as we do." He left the kitchen, callously crushing the shards of expensive porcelain and crystal under his heels, the remnants of a shattered evening reflecting the turmoil of his home life. That night, Mr. Harris couldn't find the solace of sleep. Usually he would collapse into bed and drift off instantly, but this time, rest evaded him. He heard Jessica take a long, soothing shower, followed by a hushed conversation on the phone. Eventually, she slipped into bed with the grace of a snake, a thought that unsettled him deeply. The unbidden association with the serpent filled him with discomfort, even fear. He imagined her waiting for him to fall asleep before wrapping him in her hair and suffocating him. Disturbed by these thoughts, he got up without a word and headed downstairs to the living room. The couch, with its inviting cushions, seemed far more appealing than the marital bed at that moment. "Mr. Harris lay down, tucking a throw pillow under his head. Despite the comfort, an unfamiliar sweet scent pervaded his senses, like a thin stream of perfume. He sniffed the air, trying to locate the source, and realized it was the pillow. Moonlight, he thought, recalling the name of the cologne Jessica had gifted him last year. She had been enamored with that scent, but he found it unbearable. The smell of jasmine mixed with deceit gave him instant heartburn, nausea, and headaches. Sweet, sharp, and suffocating. He had thrown away the bottle immediately, much to Jessica's dismay. He had to explain that he had a terrible allergy and wasn't to blame. Now, his house reeked of that detested perfume, even though there hadn't been any guests recently. Jessica, with her penchant for gossip, would have surely mentioned any visitors. Was it possible she had taken a lover? He tossed and turned on the couch until dawn without finding sleep. Exhausted, he dragged himself to work. The restaurant, still deserted at this early hour, looked forlorn. The empty bar counter served as a stark reminder of his current predicament. The waiters chatted lazily among themselves, while the kitchen was a hive of activity. He approached the waitress who had witnessed Justin's abrupt departure the previous evening. "Could one of you take over the bar today? We haven't found a new bartender yet," he asked, his tone weary. As he said this, Mr. Harris realized he hadn't just lost a bartender, he was also without a manager. And if he wasn't mistaken, he might soon be without a wife. He glanced around, feeling a pang of hopelessness. Just then, Jessica entered the restaurant, impeccably made up and dressed in an unbearably expensive outfit, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. Trailing behind her was an unremarkable man in faded jeans, the bill of his baseball cap shadowing his face. "What do you want, mister?" Harris asked tersely, unable to mask his irritation. With a radiant smile, Jessica approached her husband and kissed him on the lips. The gesture felt empty, a hollow display meant for onlookers rather than an expression of genuine affection. The man in the cap hung back, his presence an unsettling mystery. "Mister." Harris pulled away slightly, searching Jessica's eyes for answers. "Who is this?" he asked, nodding toward the stranger. "Oh, him," Jessica replied, her tone breezy. "This is Tom. He's here to discuss some business opportunities. Thought it might be a good distraction from all the stress." "Mister." Harris eyed Tom suspiciously. "Business opportunities? What kind of business?" Jessica laughed lightly. "Relax, dear. Just some ideas to diversify our investments. I thought you'd appreciate it." "Mister." Harris forced a smile, his mind racing with suspicions. The unwelcome scent of moonlight still lingered, a symbol of the betrayal he feared. He nodded curtly and stepped aside, allowing Jessica and Tom to enter the restaurant fully. As they moved past him, Mr. Harris felt a cold pit of dread settles in his stomach. He watched them with narrowed eyes, determined to uncover the truth behind this sudden, unsettling turn of events. The restaurant buzzed with its usual morning activities, but for him, the day had already taken a dark and ominous turn. He grimaced at the sticky sweet kiss from her lipstick, a sickening greeting that only heightened his irritation. "Yesterday, Jerry, I was a bit wrong. Forgive me, darling. And guess what? I completely forgot. I've prepared a gift for you. I found a great chef." "I don't need a chef," Jerry cut her off brusquely. The guy in jeans stepped closer, and Jerry held his breath, staring into the stranger's dark, deceptively calm eyes. There was nothing of the usual relaxed friendliness. Instead, it was the call of a predator eyeing its prey. "I can do everything," the man said, his voice low and guttural, thick like caramel sauce. "I can prep, I can cook." His hair, tucked under the baseball cap, was black with a reddish tint, and he smelled of jasmine and lily, the cursed moonlight. "Can you handle the bar?" Jerry asked hoarsely. The guy just shrugged easily. "Then change and get behind the counter, Mr. Harris ordered brusquely. "If you don't mess up today, the job is yours." Inside, Jerry seethed. If this scumbag was sleeping with another man's wife, it would be fitting for him to work for her husband. Of course, he wouldn't get paid. The internship could be prolonged indefinitely, and when the time came, Jerry would let him go, letting him complain wherever he wanted. But he wouldn't go anywhere because Mr. Harris could readily explain to him what happens to those fools who dare to threaten the family happiness of serious men. And Jessica, he would figure out how to make her pay for her infidelity. A sense of grim satisfaction filled him, and he even allowed himself a brief, almost imperceptible smile. His wife, however, noticed it and happily followed him into the office. "So, did you like my gift?" she asked playfully, snuggling up to her husband. He gently pushed her away. "I have a meeting in half an hour, Jessica," he said. "Remember I told you?" Of course she smiled. "New spice suppliers, so is it today?" Mr. Harris looked directly into his wife's beautiful face. "Jessica," he said slowly, "I never told you it was about spices. How did you know?" A shadow crossed her face. "You didn't tell me," she laughed nervously, adjusting her hair. "Well, for some reason I thought, well, never mind. I'll confess everything." "Mr. Harris leaned back, crossing his arms. "Go on then, I'm listening." Jessica took a deep breath, clearly trying to gather her thoughts. "All right, you caught me. I overheard you on the phone the other night. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I heard enough to piece it together." He raised an eyebrow, not entirely convinced. "Really? And what else did you overhear?" Her eyes darted to the side, avoiding his gaze. "Just bits and pieces about the suppliers and something about a new deal. Honestly, that's all." "Jessica," he said, his voice cold, "I don't believe you." She swallowed hard, the playful demeanor completely gone. "Jerry, please. I just want us to get back to how things were. I've been lonely and I made mistakes, but I never meant for things to get so bad between us." He sighed, feeling the weight of her words, but also the deep-seated betrayal. "We'll see, Jessica. For now, let's just get through today." She nodded, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Okay, I understand." Mr. Harris watched her leave the office, a mix of emotions churning inside him. As he prepared for his meeting, the lingering scent of moonlight seemed to mock him, a reminder of the tangled mess his life had become. Determined to regain control, he pushed the thoughts aside and focused on the task at hand. He had a business to run, and he wouldn't let personal dramas ruin his professional life. But deep down, he knew that the real challenges lay not in the restaurant, but in the complexities of his own heart and home. Chris told me, the manager, former manager Jessica emphasized. You see, he called me yesterday, and, well, he already regrets his decision, and he's ready to come back if you don't mind. I even told him he could come here this morning. That's when he told me who you have a meeting with. He'll be here by 11. You don't mind, do you? He smirked, a hint of irritation flickering in his eyes. I see you're already getting involved in my business, setting up meetings, bringing in new employees. Well, sorry, she smiled again, trying to lighten the mood. I just want to help you with your affairs. So, well, your wish. She abruptly changed her tone, seeing that her husband wasn't responding to her flirtatious teasing. Since you don't care that we're drifting apart and becoming strangers, since you don't appreciate that I'm trying to somehow save our marriage. Calm down, he caught her hand gently. It wasn't time for serious conversations yet. Later he'd deal with their marriage and everything else, but for now, he needed to allay his wife's anxious vigilance. Calm down, he repeated. I really appreciate your concern. I'm just probably not in the best shape right now, sorry. Okay, she ran her finger along the lapel of his jacket. Well then, you'll have to do something for me. What? He smiled, trying to diffuse the tension. New shoes, earrings, what? No, Jessica's voice dropped to a whisper. I want to meet your future partners, but not right away. First, we'll play them. Listen to what I came up with. You'll invite the dishwasher, who annoys you so much, into the office and introduce her as your wife. Say she's just a simple girl who works here, washing dishes. And when they believe that, I'll show up. It'll be hilarious, I think. Jerry coughed, taken aback by her bizarre request. That's not quite appropriate. After all, it's business negotiations, not a party. His wife shrugged, her expression turning cold. But it seems you wanted me to forgive you, so I'll forgive you if you arrange this little show for me. After all, I have so few amusements in life, she sighed dramatically. That's right. Just traveling every few months, chatting with the fitness trainer, hairdresser, cosmetologist, masseur, and shopping, he listed gloomily. Did I forget anything? Oh yes, meetings with the same bored rich ladies as yourself. Stop it, Jessica interrupted him sharply. Do you want to offend me again? And here I thought for once you decided to do something nice for me, but now I see that you're just. Quiet, quiet, he forced another smile, hiding his growing frustration. Fine, if this little show entertains you, I'll arrange it for you. Enjoy it. Jessica's eyes lit up with delight. Thank you, Jerry. You won't regret this. It'll be fun. He nodded, though he felt a knot of unease tightening in his stomach. The idea of turning a serious business meeting into a farce didn't sit well with him, but if it would keep Jessica happy and buy him some peace, he would go along with it. For now. As she left the office, Jerry leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. The scent of moonlight still lingered in the air, mingling with the stale scent of old coffee. His life was spiraling out of control, and he didn't know how to stop it. But he would play Jessica's game if only to keep the fragile peace in their tumultuous marriage. He glanced at the clock. It was almost time for the meeting. He stood up, straightened his tie, and prepared himself for the charade ahead. Today would be a test of his patience and his ability to navigate the treacherous waters of both his professional and personal life. With a deep breath, he stepped out of the office, ready to face whatever came next. The suppliers will arrive in 10 minutes, Jerry told Jessica, glancing at his watch. You can. I'll be peeking through the keyhole. Jessica clapped her hands with excitement. I'll enter at the right moment, but for now, I'll sit at the bar, she beamed, her joy akin to a child unexpectedly handed a coveted gift. Mr. Harris suddenly thought it was a good chance to get rid of the dishwasher from the restaurant. He could present it as if she barged in on important negotiations and ruined everything with her presence. Victoria was just finishing up another batch of dishes when, right in front of her, the chef emerged as if from the ground. "Doing the dishes?" he inquired casually. Victoria reacted with her usual composure. "Just work," she replied emotionlessly and continued her task. "Stupid cow," he cursed mentally. What the hell? She can't even get a smile out of her, or at least some intonation. Wooden face, wooden voice, Pinocchio, not a woman. "I need your help, Victoria. Could you take a short break?" He hesitated, inventing some explanation for his request. "I have an important meeting right now. My wife was supposed to be there, but she's feeling unwell. I want you to play her role, just briefly. It's just for the contract signing." Victoria slowly removed her rubber gloves. There was still no expression on her face. "Wife for a contract signing?" she asked. "Seems like it's not a social gathering." "Just what do you know about gatherings, you rich mister?" Harris instantly flew into a rage. "Have you seen them on TV and decided you're now an etiquette expert? I haven't fired you only out of pity yet. You're a beggar and nothing more. You'd better be in my office in a minute or else." She listened to him without any fear in her calm, fearless eyes. There was a slight interest. For a moment it seemed to him that she was simply amused by the spectacle of his anger, as if watching a movie about an angry boss. "I'll be waiting for you in the office," he said, and quickly left the kitchen. "The cleaner, Mrs. Lee," watched him go. "Jerk," she commented quietly on the situation and looked at Victoria with pity. Yesterday he fired Justin from work, and he was a good guy. Now he's decided to start a new amusement. Don't give in, girl. He's a fool. The suppliers arrived on time, without delay, right on time. "Mr. Harris greeted them joyfully. "It's so nice to deal with punctual people." "We are always punctual," reassured Robert, who was leading the negotiations. He was accompanied by some strange, silent guy. "Mr. Harris never understood whether he was a partner or a bodyguard. "Well, whatever, in the end, please come to my office," he invited. "Coffee?" "No, but thank you," smiled Robert. "Unfortunately, we're short on time. We're just waiting for a new batch of cinnamon, cumin, and several types of pepper. Everything needs to be checked. Do you personally handle this?" "Mr. Harris raised his eyebrows. "Always. We can't afford such negligence to supply restaurants with stale, expired goods. So let's proceed to the signing of the documents." And one moment, Gentleman the dishwasher entered the room like a silent shadow. "Allow me to introduce you to my wife, Victoria." They were polite fellows, those suppliers. Upon seeing Victoria, they rose from their seats in unison, and she, a bit flustered, didn't even bother to take off her apron, and shaggy straw locks fell across her face. Well, one could only hope that Jessica, standing behind the door, found this embarrassing sight enjoyable. "Your wife assists you in your work," Robert ventured. "Mr. Harris smiled politely, as if ignoring the hint. "My wife isn't afraid of work. She's always ready to lend a hand wherever it's needed." Victoria stood there, awkwardly shifting her weight from one foot to the other. Her presence was a stark contrast to the polished businessmen in the room, but she held her ground with quiet dignity. "Well, let's get to it then," Robert said, breaking the tension. They sat back down, and the room filled with the sound of rustling papers and the scratching of pens. Mr. Harris kept stealing glances at Victoria, hoping Jessica was enjoying this absurd show from her hidden vantage point. Yet, beneath his outward composure, he was seething with frustration and anxiety. Victoria's calm presence, even in this contrived situation, was a reminder of the stability he desperately lacked. Her unflappable demeanor contrasted sharply with the chaos in his personal life, and he couldn't help but feel a pang of regret for dragging her into this mess. As the meeting progressed, Victoria's quiet competence became apparent. She answered questions succinctly and displayed a surprising knowledge of the restaurant's operations. The suppliers, initially taken aback by her presence, soon found themselves impressed by her understated efficiency. Mr. Harris, meanwhile, felt a growing unease. The plan to use Victoria as a pawn in his marital games was backfiring. Instead of exposing her as a liability, she was proving to be an asset. He glanced at the door, wondering if Jessica was still watching and what she thought of this unexpected turn of events. Finally, the documents were signed and the meeting concluded. The suppliers shook hands with Mr. Harris and Victoria, expressing their satisfaction with the proceedings. "Thank you for your time," Robert said, as they prepared to leave. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Mrs. Harris." Victoria nodded, still maintaining her composed facade. "Likewise." As soon as the door closed behind them, Mr. Harris let out a long breath, turning to Victoria. "Well done," he said, unable to hide his grudging admiration. She simply nodded and walked out of the office, leaving him to ponder the unexpected strength of the woman he had underestimated. The scent of jasmine lingered in the air, a reminder of the complexities that still awaited him outside this room. "She helps me with everything and doesn't shy away from any task. For example, recently we lost a rather unpleasant individual who worked as a dishwasher, and Victoria temporarily took on those duties, Mr. Harris said, his tone firm. "Oh, indeed, Robert muttered, nodding in approval. One can only envy the man for whom his wife is not only a beloved but also a colleague. But let's get back to business, shall we?" "Of course, Mr. Harris agreed, his anger simmering beneath the surface. "The fresh supply. Hand me the contract, darling." Victoria suddenly spoke up. "May I have a look?" 3 pairs of eyes stared at her in astonishment. Without waiting for a response, she took the contract sample from Mr. Harris's hands. "We, Mr. Harris gritted his teeth, barely containing his anger, "are used to doing everything together." Victoria quickly scanned the sheet covered in small print. "Oh," she exclaimed, "the supplies are coming from Morocco. I love vacationing there. Moroccan spices are among the best in the world." Robert flashed another smile. "Indispensable for many dishes, and ours are sourced from a special plantation where, besides fragrant spices, you can grow a lot of other things." Victoria smiled even more brightly. "Darling," she said, "I advise you not to sign this contract." "What nonsense are you spewing, Mr. Harris exploded. "Do you want to ruin an important deal for me?" "No. I want you to know these scoundrels operate under fictional names. There's no company called Sunny Spices anywhere. And in those spice bags, they transport carefully concealed batches of banned substances, which they then distribute through their contacts. Tell me, has anyone offered you a new chef position? A bartender?" Jerry whispered. "Jessica brought him." "Jessica. I see. Better call the police, my dear, and instruct security not to let them leave." "Listen," Robert finally found his voice again. "This is all some dirty insinuation. It's slander." "Then it'll be easier for you to explain it to the police." Victoria shrugged and left the room. "Well, Mr. Harris said, looking at the faces of his thwarted partners, now turned black with fear, "I'm afraid you'll have to stay a little longer than originally planned." "And what happened next?" Justin asked. They were again sitting in Victoria's tiny kitchen behind the covered windowsill. Victoria smiled. "Nothing much. We busted the whole gang, including that so-called bartender who turned chef. Turns out Jessica, the boss's wife, was deeply involved in all of this. They set her up with this bartender, not bartender, chef, not chef, and they became lovers. I don't know how long it lasted. But apparently she fell in love, and he whispered in her ears that Mr. Harris would be taken down, and all his money would be hers alone. She believed him, poor thing. Of course they arrested her too. she'll go down as an accomplice. Yeah, Justin smirked. Never thought I'd sympathize with our big boss in life, but, well, it could have been worse if they had succeeded. The doorbell rang. "Are you expecting someone?" Justin asked. "I can leave if you need privacy." "Stay put," Victoria reassured him. "It's probably just a neighbor." But it was Mr. Harris standing at the threshold. "Good evening," Victoria greeted him. "May I come in?" the boss asked. "Is it all right?" "Please come in," Victoria said. Justin peeked out from the kitchen. "Everything okay?" "Hey, Victoria." "Hey there, I'll leave now." "No, stay, Mr. Harris requested. "It's good that both of you are here. I want to talk." He turned to Victoria, his expression serious. "Victoria," he began, his voice uncharacteristically soft, "I owe you an apology. I misjudged you. Today you showed me a side of you I didn't know existed. You saved my business and possibly my life by exposing those criminals." Victoria nodded, her face impassive. "I did what I thought was right." Mr. Harris took a deep breath. "I need your help. Not just with the business, but with understanding what happened with Jessica. I need to make sense of it all, and I think you might be the only one who can help me do that." Victoria's eyes softened slightly. "I'll help you, Mr. Harris. But only if you promise to treat people with the respect they deserve. No more of the anger and the yelling. We all deserve better than that." Mr. Harris nodded, humbled. "I promise. I don't know how to fix everything, but I want to start by doing right by those I've wronged." "Then let's start," Victoria said, extending her hand. "Together." As Mr. Harris shook her hand, he felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could all find a way to move forward from the chaos and build something better together. "Today I've been through a lot. You saved me, my business, my reputation." Finally, Mr. Harris began, but Victoria started to protest, shaking her head. "It's not necessary," she said, but he stopped her with a gesture. "It is," he insisted. "I've learned something about you. I know you helped not just for my sake. You wanted revenge for what those bastards did to your life, and I want to apologize for how I treated you. You're brave, Victoria, and honestly, I admire you. That's what I wanted to say first and foremost. But there's more. I know you're alone with your little daughter, without money." So here he took keys out of his pocket and placed them in her hand. "This is for your new apartment. Tomorrow we'll sort everything out properly, with all the paperwork, and I want to give you a share in my business. Also, if you agree, I'd like you to take on the role of managing the restaurant. As you can see, I need someone smart and experienced in that position. And I'll feel better if it's you." Victoria stared at him, stunned. Before she could respond, Mr. Harris turned to Justin. "And now, Justin, I want to talk to you. I'm very guilty before you too." "Oh, come on," Justin grumbled. "I'm not owed anything. After all, I didn't end up in debt." "True, Mr. Harris acknowledged. "I did mention I've been through a lot today, right?" He smiled a sad smile. "When a person goes through such things, they start to see many things differently, like you. Even though you initially fell for my stupid orders to create a scene with Victoria, you eventually disregarded it all and left. It was easier for you to lose your job than to strike a deal with your conscience, and for that, I am proud of you. It's a shame you didn't inherit your honesty from me, but your mother." "What does my mother have to do with this?" Justin whispered. "Wait, did you? You? Forgive me, son." Mr. Harris almost whispered back. "I know you never knew your father because I turned out to be a worthless one. I abandoned a pregnant girl because I was a proud idiot. I thought I deserved better than a simple girl from a culinary school, but I loved her. Yet pride won. and I thought I almost managed to forget about it, succeeded. But when you came to work, I couldn't be mistaken. You resemble her so much. I made some inquiries and realized I wasn't mistaken at all." Justin stared at him, wide-eyed. Well, Dad," he finally muttered. "I think," Victoria said, "we all need some tea." "I'll brew some tea," Justin offered, standing up. "That's good, mister," Harris exclaimed, then turned back to his son eagerly. "Justin, tell me about your mother. How is she? My Sarah." A year later, Victoria and Justin congratulated Mr. Harris and his bride, Sarah, on their wedding. "Look how well everything turned out," Victoria whispered to Justin. "Your parents are back together, and it seems it's for good this time. Your father has realized a lot and managed to change. He's come to understand that honesty, genuine feelings, love, they're all more important than superficial things." "I hope so," Justin sighed. "It's amazing how much one has to go through sometimes to become human again. Though that doesn't apply to you." Victoria, he glanced at her, once again struck by how beautiful she had become. Her slim figure, graceful stride, and elegant movements were more noticeable now that her constant pallor had disappeared, replaced by a gentle golden tan. A rosy blush adorned her cheeks, and Victoria's hair had grown, now cascading in stubborn curls. She seemed younger, almost like a girl. Perhaps this calm and happy life had such an effect. Victoria smiled at Justin, her eyes sparkling with happiness. "Thank you, Justin. Life has been kinder lately, hasn't it?" "Indeed," Justin agreed, taking her hand in his. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Victoria nodded, looking at the joyous scene around them. Mr. Harris and Sarah were dancing, their faces alight with newfound love and understanding. It was a testament to the power of forgiveness and the strength of the human spirit to overcome even the darkest times. As the evening progressed, Victoria and Justin found themselves sitting together, sharing stories and dreams for the future. The past year's trials and triumphs had forged an unbreakable bond between them, and they looked forward to building a future filled with hope and happiness. Under the twinkling lights and the soft hum of music, they made a silent promise to cherish every moment and to always stand by each other, no matter what challenges life might bring. "Yes, of course it did," Victoria said softly, her voice steady as she resolved to confess. "I've always wanted to tell you something important." Now it was Justin's turn to be surprised. He took a deep breath, the words tumbling out in a rush. "Listen, I understand this might be premature, but what's happened? Victoria, you've lost someone you loved, and maybe you're not even thinking about relationships right now, but we're friends, aren't we? And your daughter, I feel like she's attached to me, and I to her. Overall," he blurted out, desperate to get to the point, "I love you. And I just want to ask, if I were to invite you on a date, a real date, would you come?" He was afraid to look her in the eye, but when he finally dared, he felt a weight lift off his soul. Victoria was smiling, not the polite smile of someone about to politely decline, but a very tender one, the smile of someone who is loved. "And when will you invite me?" she asked mischievously. Justin choked up with joy. "Whenever you want, we can do it today, or even right now. Just don't joke with me, okay? I'm inviting you on a date, and will you come? Really, will you?" She gently placed both hands on his shoulders, her eyes sparkling with warmth. "I thought you'd never ask." His heart soared, and he felt a surge of happiness he hadn't known was possible. "How about right now? There's a little cafe around the corner, perfect for a first date." Victoria nodded, her smile growing wider. "That sounds wonderful." They stood up, and as they walked towards the door, Justin felt an overwhelming sense of relief and excitement. This was the beginning of something new, something beautiful. Hand in hand, they left the apartment, ready to embrace whatever the future held for them. The past year's struggles had brought them closer, and now they were ready to build a future together, filled with love and hope. Under the evening sky, they walked towards the cafe, their hearts light and their spirits high. This was just the beginning of their story, one that promised to be filled with joy, laughter, and endless possibilities. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've covered a lot of ground, and I'm excited to hear what you've learned. What's one key takeaway from this video that you're planning to put into practice? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to see how you're going to apply these insights in your own life. If you enjoyed this video, please leave your comment and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content like this. Your support helps us bring more valuable insights your way. See you in the next video.